discover the surprising gift of a $4,000 wheelchair, an incredible transformation. After my daughter's diagnosis, Sarah could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders as she trudged home after a particularly grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. Her scrubs clung to her skin, damp with sweat and exhaustion, but it was the thought of her daughter, Emily, waiting for her in their small house that kept her moving. As a nurse, she devoted herself to caring for others, but the stark reality of her personal life sometimes felt like a hospital room with no exit. Outside, children played, their laughter echoing against the peeling paint of her home, a reminder of a childhood Emily could have had, a life tinged with joy instead of uncertainty. Fear clawed at her heart. The day passed in a daze, flipping through charts and procedures, but the moment she heard Emily's doctor speak of the diagnosis, everything froze. The future, once bright and limitless, began to darken with every word. How could she face this new reality? The labyrinth of medical jargon spun in her mind, drowning out her own desperate thoughts. It was a constant tug-of-war between hope and despair, the tension tightening with each passing day. As she pondered their modest life, her eyes filled with unrelenting worry. How was she ever going to afford a wheelchair, the $4,000 wheelchair that would grant Emily the independence she needed? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each evening, as she walked up the old wooden stairs of her home, the worries stacked high like the dishes left in her kitchen sink. Pride clenched her throat, a bitter reminder of her independence. How could she ask for help? Her mind raced, ideas bouncing off the walls of reason, all circling back to that price tag, that insurmountable goal she wasn't sure how to achieve. Even the thought of a fundraiser whispered through the air felt like a heavy cloak straining her spirit. Seeking assistance was one thing, admitting her struggles was another. The two felt irreconcilable. Her heart quickened as she found herself standing in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman caught between survival and surrender. The laughter of children lingered outside, echoing hollowly in her ears. Emily deserved to play, to laugh freely, but how could Sarah make that happen when every moment felt suffocated by anxiety? The pressure mounted, a relentless squeeze in her chest that whispered despair. What if she wasn't strong enough to pull through? But if she didn't try, if she held onto her pride too tightly, would it all fall apart? Yet beneath the surface of that fear, a flicker of determination began to glow. Emily's smile was the balm to her aching heart, pulling her back from the ledge each time life threatened to push her forward. What if, just what if, reaching out could change everything? Dread and hope coiled tight within her. She had one chance to connect with the community she so often kept at arm's length. As faces filled her thoughts, friends, neighbors, even Mr. Reynolds, it struck her that asking for help might not mean weakness. It might actually mean strength. But as that realization settled, the walls seemed to close in around her. In that pivotal moment, she gazed out the window, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, and felt something shift deep inside. Could vulnerability be her greatest armor? What if the act of asking sparked a connection she'd never known existed? Her resolve built, teetering on the edge of a decision. With a shaky breath, she stood at the precipice, waiting for the courage to engage the world. But as she did, an overbearing silence enveloped her, reminding her that pride might just be the greatest barrier on this journey. Would she break through, or would she remain trapped in a struggle of her own making? As dawn unfolded the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, the remnants of her late-night snack strewn before her. The starkness of the situation cut deeper at that hour, where thoughts felt sharper and burdens heavier. She took a deep breath, pulling a pen across the pad of paper beside her, the feeble scratch of the ink breaking the mundane silence. She needed a plan, an outline of possibilities. Each stroke of the pen transformed the blank page into a tapestry of hope, woven with frayed threads of despair. First, she wrote down the steps needed for reaching out. 1. Speak to neighbors. 2. Create a fundraising page online. 3. Consider sharing Emily's story. With each item, she felt a tightening in her chest, the shifting balance between her pride and desperation hanging in the balance. As she moved on to her next point, a flood of memories surged. Emily's laughter, her spark, her joy in the simplest of things. She realized vividly that the wheelchair was not just an apparatus. It was a vessel for Emily's freedom. It represented a chance for her daughter to reignite those moments of childhood bliss that seemed to slip further away. But Sarah's determination dangled precariously between the tangible need for resources and the looming fear of judgment. The memories stirred something deeper within her, flickers of a past where her tenacity had saved lives, not just as a nurse, but as a mother. She had learned the art of emotional resilience, the way to sift through chaos and emerge with renewed resolve. But how would that experience translate now, as she faced an internal storm just as tough as any medical crisis? She gripped the pen tightly, pulling her thoughts inward. But action must accompany intention. It wasn't enough to scribble down a list. She needed to embody courage in the face of vulnerability. Now that she had made the decision to reach out, the hesitation began its dance, whispering that this act of asking for help would be accompanied by shame, by weakness. But what if the opposite were true? With Emily in mind, she inhaled deeply, the resolve cascading through her. It was time to transform herself from merely the caregiver at work into an advocate for her family. She gathered her thoughts, drawing from those long nights spent helping others to confront her own discomfort. This journey wasn't just about seeking assistance. It was about forging connections and inviting compassion and understanding into their lives. Picking up her phone, she hesitated by the contacts list, internal dialogue raging. Who could she trust to share this battle with? The neighbors, she decided. They had once shared camaraderie over garden fences and holiday barbecues. A neighborhood post sounded inviting, an explanation of their challenges wrapped in a story of resilience. With shaky fingers, she began to draft the message, the tension between pride and vulnerability still waging a fierce battle inside her. Would they understand? Would they respond with kindness or judgment? Despite the uncertainty, she compelled herself to press send, feeling the weight of the world shift slightly despite the unknown consequences. Sarah glanced out the kitchen window again, the world coming alive with the day's activities. Laughter and movement flooded the street, ringing with life. Each sound was a reminder of the life she wanted for Emily. It was a profound moment of clarity. Moving past vulnerability and opening up could illuminate a path she had previously feared to tread. As the seconds ticked by, she felt the pulse of anticipation run through her veins. Was this the beginning of a transformation, not just for Emily, but for herself too? The prospect of support loomed tantalizingly close. Yet with the shiver of hope came a niggling doubt. What if the outreach did not yield the results she craved? What if pride still held the upper hand? That thought hung in the air, a reminder that the hardest battles were often fought internally. Sarah's heart beat wildly as she realized the next step remained a leap into the unknown. Would seeking help solidify their strength or unravel their lives further? Only time would tell as she braced herself for whatever response awaited on the other side of vulnerability. Sarah's phone buzzed, jolting her from a reverie filled with anxiety and hope. The notification glowed on the screen. A reply. Her heart raced, oscillating between eager anticipation and dread. The weight of what she had decided to share clawed at her conscience. Had that decision been bold or foolish? With a deep breath, she opened the message. The words tumbled out. Generous support from the neighbors, promises of help not only in word but in deed. Some offered financial contributions, while others pledged time and effort. Gratitude surged through her, quickly tempered by disbelief. Could this really be the start of something substantial, something that brought her back to who she used to be? This wave of support ignited in her a flicker of her former self, the woman who had once navigated crises with purpose and commanding spirit. Drawing from her nursing background, she knew the importance of a cohesive team in achieving results. Her phone buzzed again, a flurry of messages now lighting up the screen, encouraging her to come together for a neighborhood meeting to discuss Emily's needs. The irony didn't escape her. The previous day, she had viewed this vulnerability as a potential crumbling of her pride. Just as she felt it would diminish her strength, it now seemed to forge a new sense of community around her. Perhaps there was strength in vulnerability after all. The paradox stirred something deeper, a capacity for connection that she hadn't recognized needed nurturing. She began to prepare for the meeting, jotting down her thoughts. It wasn't just about gathering help. It was about being honest about their realities, her fears, and Emily's dreams. The narrative she hoped to shape was not laden with pity, but rather infused with resilience and hope. As she sorted through her emotions and the details, something sparked within her, a collective strength that mirrored some of the most formidable teams she had worked alongside in her nursing career. There had been numerous moments when patient care transformed lives because, at the core, the caregivers believed in the journey together. Time slipped away as she honed her message, her pen flying over pages filled with clarity. She needed to articulate what Emily's new wheelchair would mean, not merely as a piece of equipment, but as a conduit for rediscovered freedom, allowing her daughter to run, play, and laugh without the limitations that had confined her. Yet, mixed with this productivity was an unsettling anxiety. Would the meeting capture the essence of their struggle? What if her hope fell flat in front of the very neighbors she longed to involve? The haunting whisper of doubt circled back, taunting her with the fear of vulnerability unmet. The meeting evening arrived, and Sarah stood at the doorway of her home, anxiety weaving its way through her thoughts. She gazed at the faces of familiar neighbors, gathering under the gentle lifting dusk. Each smile felt like a safety net, catching her as she launched herself into the fear of revealing what cut deep in her heart. She was ready to confront her trepidation head-on and, perhaps, face her own reflection. As her voice filled the space, the discord among her emotions quieted. Those in attendance listened intently, empathy radiating off their expressions. She shared carefully, painting Emily's story with vivid strokes of emotion and aspiration, inviting each neighbor to see not just the challenge, but also the joy they aimed to reclaim. She felt herself grow, each moment an opportunity to fortify connections, to actively participate in her journey. As the evening drew on, the conversations expanded beyond Emily's needs. Ideas flowed freely, suggestions exchanged for community gatherings to aid in not only Emily's situation, but in the collective spirit of support that unexpectedly blossomed around her. Sarah emerged from that night transformed, no longer merely the single mother fighting against the tide, but now a facilitator of hope. Yet, as she finally closed the door behind her and sank into the embrace of solitude, a new question glimmered in her mind. What would happen when the initial excitement faded? Would the community stay, or was this a fleeting moment driven by sympathy rather than sustained commitment? The echoing silence beckoned her to find the answer, leaving her at the threshold of a discovery she needed to confront. The momentum of their newfound support hung in the balance. Would she be able to nurture it into something enduring, and in doing so, elevate not only Emily's life, but her own? The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, igniting the room with a soft glow. Yet Sarah felt heaviness settle in her chest. The hollow promise of yesterday's support weighed against her expectations. She moved through her morning routine mechanically, the echoes of hope from the meeting juxtaposed with her gnawing doubts. She needed to keep this momentum alive, not just for Emily, but for herself. The thought was both exhilarating and daunting. As she prepared breakfast, a plan began to form. To ensure that her neighbors continued this journey with her, she pondered what could draw them in deeper. She recalled her experiences as a nurse, where follow-ups turned initial treatments into sustainable health plans. Every small victory bred confidence, and she wondered if the same principles could be applied to this new community support. The idea crystallized. She would host a get-together. It would be more than a group effort. It would be an opportunity to build trust, to foster that shared vulnerability she had weaponized the night prior. This gathering could transcend mere pity, transforming into a space for dialogue and collaboration, inviting her neighbors to share their own stories, their own challenges. After all, support was a two-way street. She quickly jotted down an outline, envisioning not just a space for Emily's needs, but a platform for collective narratives. This was no longer solely about her daughter. It was a chance to weave the fabric of community that tended to fray in times of personal hardship. With excitement bubbling up within her, she spent the next few hours fine-tuning her proposal and inviting neighbors, framing the event not just as a fundraiser, but a potluck, a real connection. It began to take shape in her mind, a blend of their lives, mingling laughter with shared vulnerability over home-cooked meals. It was a gathering that promised friendship, support, and perhaps the will to adapt and grow. However, an echo of uncertainty crept up again. What if no one came? What if her own insecurities bled through her plans, leaving them vulnerable to collapse? Those thoughts chased her as she delivered invitations. Each neighbor's smile felt like a small affirmation, yet a part of her remained entrenched in wariness. When she reached out to her neighbor, Mara, a retired schoolteacher whose own grandchildren frequented the block, she felt a particularly refreshing wave of camaraderie. Mara had always been welcoming, and to Sarah's surprise, she eagerly signed up to help with logistics, leaning into her own recent challenges of feeling disconnected from her family. But even as connections grew, another layer of complexity emerged. Conversations within her swirled with doubt about her professional future. In her eagerness to orchestrate this community project, she felt threads of her nursing identity unraveling. Had she moved from caregiver to organizer? Was this shift diluting her professional foundation? Those questions plagued her even as the day of the gathering approached. The anxiety coursed through her veins on the evening of the event, transforming her kitchen into a tableau of chaos as she set up tables and arranged chairs. Her heart raced with each unexpected noise from outside. Each ring of the doorbell sent a shiver of anticipation coursing through her. As neighbors began to arrive, the energy shifted. There was laughter, the pleasant mingling smells of home-cooked food, and a sense of purpose that quickly filled the atmosphere. Sarah engaged everyone, her anxiety falling away as she navigated through discussions. But then, in the midst of it all, a familiar voice cut through. The ominous tone of her former professional life, a colleague from her nursing days, Ted, joined the gathering. His presence sent a ripple of tension through Sarah. He was known for his blunt assessments, a stark reminder of her former life, an anchor to a world she had stepped away from. His gaze penetrated the room, assessing the homemade dishes, the aimed camaraderie, and then, suddenly, Sarah. As intrigued as she was, she felt the vulnerability of judgment creeping back into view. Would he appreciate her attempts at building community, or would he scoff at her non-professional approaches? In that moment, she understood that facing Ted wouldn't just challenge her plans, it would force her to confront her own definition of success. Could she embrace this newfound identity, fueling her passion for connecting with others, or would his scrutiny shatter her renewed confidence? The evening teetered at the edge of something significant. She knew she had to navigate this interaction delicately, but the stakes were now far beyond Emily's wheelchair. The moment to face her doubts and redefine her journey loomed ahead as she braced herself for Ted's response. The sound of laughter faded into an anxious lull as Ted stepped deeper into the colorful gathering. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, vying with the liveliness around her for dominance. Memories of countless shifts spent by hospital beds and in bustling ERs raced through her mind. The sterile smell of antiseptic felt all-consuming, suffocating the warmth radiating from her home. She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus. As Ted approached, Sarah's fingers fidgeted with a frayed corner of the tablecloth, a nervous habit from her nursing days. "Sarah," he said, his voice a blend of familiarity and detachment, "nice to see you in this social light." The slight twitch in his lips left room for interpretation. Was it amusement or disdain? "Thanks, Ted," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're trying something new here." Her words lingered in the air, a subtle challenge. Too casual, too optimistic. The defensiveness brewed inside her. Did he sense her unease? They both scanned the gathering, vibrant and filled with life. Neighbors were animatedly sharing their dishes, the clinks of glasses punctuating the conversations. Sarah, however, felt as if the walls were inching closer, the air growing thicker each second he lingered. What if he tore down the vibrant atmosphere she had worked so hard to create with his disapproving gaze? "How's the nursing world treating you?" he asked after a pause, the eerily casual tone of inquiry bringing a wash of vulnerability over her. It was a minefield. Each step on this conversation could either lead to validation or shatter her confidence completely. Would he criticize her for stepping away from the profession she had devoted herself to? "In transition," Sarah replied, a cautious word treading on her lips. "I'm focusing on community building now." The weight of her statement echoed louder than intended. Community? He leaned in slightly, eyebrow raised in curiosity. "I didn't expect that from you. Wasn't the patient care your lifeblood?" The challenge in his tone was unmistakable. There was both intrigue and skepticism, and Sarah could feel her breath hitch. The gathering around them buzzed on, oblivious to the quiet confrontation. Each laughing face echoed her connection with the neighborhood, a connection that seemed tenuous in Ted's presence. "Care takes many forms," she retorted instinctively, catching herself in realization. Did she truly believe that? Or was she clinging to hope? Both the fear of judgment and the blossoming identity as a connector battled for prominence within her. Ted smirked, that faint hint of inquiry morphing into condescension. "Interesting perspective. But wouldn't you say that you should be working on something more substantial?" Her heart sank. Those words felt like knives, cutting deep into her recent resolve. Substantial. What could be more substantial than fostering human connection? What if this was precisely what the world needed? More tangible warmth, more empathy, rather than sterile care. Just as her thoughts escalated, Emily wheeled over, her grin unexpectedly bright. "Mom, Ted, what are you talking about?" The innocent question broke the tension, redirecting Sarah's focus. Her daughter's beaming face reminded her of why she was doing this. It had never been about professional accolades, but about real relationships that could lift them through challenging times. "Just discussing how community can change lives," Ted replied, a slight pout curling his lips. Too comfortable, too clinical. Sarah turned to Emily, feeling a newfound sense of responsibility. "We're talking about making connections, sweetheart. Joining hands and sharing our stories." "Stories are how we all grow," Emily chimed in, surprising Sarah with the earnestness of her words. The exchange shifted the room's weight, and the awareness that her daughter could articulate their shared journey brought strength surging through her. Sarah felt the worries about her nursing career fade momentarily, replaced by clarity. Connection was indeed a renewable source of strength. It was true, despite Ted's probing doubts. "You're right, Emily," Sarah added, her voice firmer than before. "Every story makes us stronger. Thank you for reminding me." Ted cleared his throat, unsure if he should step into this new dynamic. Yet the air had changed. The night no longer felt like a battleground, but a tapestry woven with potential and purpose. But the unease simmered just beneath the surface, the nagging question still lingering. Could she trust this newfound sense of self? She squared her shoulders, realizing that she wasn't the same Sarah who stepped away from the clinical world. Perhaps the true challenge wasn't about facing Ted, but about embracing her evolving journey. The evening's energy surged, but as laughter erupted around them, Sarah caught Ted's eye. Any shred of his earlier smugness had vanished. Instead, he appeared contemplative, even reflective. What was he discovering in her transformation? The thought ignited a flicker of curiosity in her own heart. Before she could dwell on it, an unexpected agenda loomed. The pile of unspoken narratives waiting to emerge intrigued her too deeply to ignore. With each story shared, the room shifted in energy. As Sarah leaned in to listen, she felt a surge of determination to uncover every hidden narrative within this gathering. But now, it was more than just about the community. It felt aligned with a deeper purpose, calling to her forgotten ambitions. She had only just uncovered the layers of this path. The time had come to explore if her journey could reshape the narratives not only around her, but within herself as well. Everyone had their stories. How many could become part of her own? Sarah eased herself into the vibrant flow of the gathering, the laughter and voices surrounding her like waves crashing upon a shore. Each note, each exchange, became a living testament to the journey she was beginning to embrace. The weight of Ted's critical gaze had lessened, even as the remnants of his challenge still clung to her thoughts. How long would that clarity last? With her daughter's words echoing in her mind, she made it a point to renew her focus. This night was not merely about socializing. It was an opportunity to observe the intricate tapestry of stories that formed the foundation of her neighborhood. Each guest had woven their threads of struggle and triumph, resonating with her own challenges and ambitions. She moved through the crowd, a one-woman expedition into the depths of human connection. First, she approached Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman known for her vibrant spirit and even brighter pastries. "You always bring such warmth," Sarah complimented, her tone animated. The compliment seemed to awaken a spark in Mrs. Henderson, who leaned closer, eager to share her latest batch of cookie recipes inspired by the flavors of her childhood. As they chatted, Sarah felt her chest swell with pride and purpose. The narrative of community was beginning to morph in her mind. It wasn't just an abstract concept, but rather the storytelling that held it aloft. This newfound perspective was catalyzing her own transformation. Next, she shifted her focus to a small group gathered around the drinks table. Among them stood Josh, a quietly passionate musician who often played soulful tunes at the local coffee shop. After the usual small talk, Sarah navigated the conversation towards the barriers he faced in pursuing his dreams: financial limitations, family expectations, the weight of doubt pressing down on him. As he shared his struggles, she couldn't help but feel a shared resonance. This is exactly the kind of connection I hope to foster, she thought, creating an environment where we can all share our burdens and hopes without fear. It was empowering to provide a space for others, a realm where vulnerability morphed into strength. Her mission had taken on a clear shape. Yet as Sarah stepped back to observe the engagement around her, the weight of her previous life still lingered. In the midst of this growth, she wrestled with a silent burden. Was she truly making a difference? Had she traded away her nursing practice, her identity, for something ephemeral and less valuable? In a moment of hesitation, Ted re-entered her field of vision. He stood at a distance, his presence shadowing what should have been a starscape of success. The curiosity she had once felt appeared now more akin to challenge. She couldn't help but wonder what he thought of her explorations. Had he simply dismissed her budding ambitions as trivial in comparison to her former life? Gathering her resolve, Sarah decided to face both her thoughts and Ted. Remaining anchored in her purpose, she walked toward him. "What do you think of the stories shared tonight?" she challenged, a spark of defiance threading through her words. His brow furrowed slightly, perhaps caught off guard by her directness. "There's value in stories," he admitted slowly, "but does it translate to meaningful action?" His answer hung heavy in the air, and Sarah's heartbeat quickened. Was he questioning her motives within this gathering? Or perhaps, as she searched his expression, she saw a hint of uncertainty. It urged her to confront her own truth, to shape her narrative moment by moment, to become active in expressing her growth rather than merely a passive participant in conversations. "Action stems from connection," she countered, her voice steady. "When we understand each other's stories, we spark a desire to help, to act, to build." And therein lay the crux of her evolution. It wasn't simply about maintaining the status quo in her own life. It was reaching out, scaling new heights, transitioning from caregiver to facilitator of empathy. As she spoke, it struck her that this exchange was more about confronting her internal conflict than Ted's judgment. But as the words settled, she sensed hesitation in his gaze, a flicker of curiosity, or perhaps even respect. Would he allow himself to see her transformation, or would she remain defined by her past professions? In this moment, the gathering morphed from a social event into something more visceral, a crucible for her rebirth. Yet, underlying her newfound strength was a deeper fear, a worry that, by pursuing this path, she might lose sight of who she had been, the compassionate caretaker still locked within. With each story shared around her and every moment spent cherishing the communal vulnerability, Sarah realized she stood at a critical junction. To craft a new version of herself, she must confront the question, what would she leave behind to forge this new identity? The atmosphere shifted as laughter and stories continued to intertwine, and Sarah felt the pull of her journey ahead. What voices would she choose to carry with her, and which ones would she have to say goodbye to? Staring into Ted's eyes, perhaps for the first time, she felt the weight of potential in the air. The question resided in her mind. Were there stories yet to be uncovered within herself, waiting to be voiced and celebrated? As the realization crystallized, Sarah faced the prospect of stepping profoundly into a new chapter. What awaited her on the other side of the uncharted waters of her identity? The soft murmur of the gathering faded into a backdrop as Sarah considered the silence around Ted's question. It hung there, prompting not only her self-reflection, but also igniting an inner debate about significance and the nature of meaningful action. Was she misguided in believing that community, rooted in the very stories she was investigating, could actually galvanize change? With renewed determination, she leaned slightly closer to Ted, attempting to bridge the gap that had formed not only between them, but also within herself. We all have stories that can inspire action. Sharing them is just the beginning. Ted's expression shifted. Skepticism mingled with intrigue as he regarded her. Inspiration is great, Sarah, but how does it translate into tangible outcomes? The boldness of her reply surprised even her. Outcomes can start small. An array of examples flooded her mind, from initiatives she'd observed in her nursing career to community outreach programs she had participated in. When people connect through shared experiences, they start to see each other as allies rather than strangers. It's about building a foundation, one interaction at a time. Seeing Tessa's response, Sarah recognized a flicker of acknowledgement crossing Ted's face, as if he were processing a revelation of sorts. But for Sarah, the real work lay ahead. Perhaps she could approach her transformation as not only a personal journey, but a chain reaction, igniting a spark within others. Feeling empowered by the conversation, she excused herself from Ted and moved back into the thrumming current of the gathering, her mind ablaze with possibilities. As each interaction unfolded, she sensed a deeper thread connecting her to those who shared openly with her. She noticed Josh again and caught a glimpse of how passion could be dormant, awaiting the right catalyst to ignite change. "Josh!" she called, her voice carrying a sense of urgency. He turned, surprised yet willing. "I was thinking, what if you organized a small concert? Share your music and your story. I know you want to reach people. It can be a meaningful action stemming from those stories we talked about. His brow furrowed in deep contemplation, and a hint of doubt graced his features. But what if it doesn't work? What if no one shows up? Then we learn, she replied, her voice firm yet warm. But if you don't try, you'll never know what could happen. I'll help you. We can gather support. His eyes flickered with the possibility she offered. They exchanged ideas, and for the first time, she felt a part of something more expansive than herself. The weight she had carried, feeling defined by her past, began to slip away as she invited Josh into action. It was a critical step, not just for him, but for her own emerging identity. However, with every exhilarating moment, a contrasting fear churned within her. What if failure marked these attempts? What if her efforts to motivate others turned barren without results? Suddenly, Ted's earlier doubt echoed in her mind. Would they see her efforts as platitudes if nothing substantial materialized afterward? This inner conflict didn't dissolve her resolve, but rather honed it. Failing was part of the process, as was redefining her role in both her life and others. She chose to bolster her fears with action, differentiating herself from the caretaker image she used to identify with. As questions about her future began to swirl more fervently, Sarah found herself longing to explore even deeper aspects of her abilities, her potential. Would she truly be able to impact Josh's life, and by extension, others within her community? Continuing her discussions that evening, she ventured into dialogues that challenged not only those around her, but also the core of her own narrative. Each story shared now bore an undercurrent of urgency. Her purpose began to crystallize before her eyes. But amidst the warmth of connection lay a startling realization. The stakes felt much higher now. With the evening waning, she caught a glimpse of Ted again, standing on the periphery, his expression one of contemplation. Intrigued by his reaction to her interactions, Sarah felt a pull to engage him once more, driven not by the urge to prove herself, but rather out of curiosity. This time would be different. It was time to challenge herself and ask one of the most pressing questions yet. What if she sought out the parts of her own story, waiting to be revealed, and shared in tandem with those of others? The imagery of her past as a nurse loomed large in her mind. True healing required exploration, not just within the community, but also within herself. She approached Ted once again, pulse quickening, and asked a question that could perhaps define the course of her journey. What do you think motivates someone to truly take action? As his response hung in the air, fate brushed against the edge of possibility, edging her toward a discovery she hadn't yet comprehended. Sarah's heart raced as she awaited Ted's response, the air between them thick with anticipation. She could see the gears turning in his mind, the skepticism slowly melting away. "Fear and necessity," he finally said, his voice steady. "Action often comes from a place of discomfort, a need to change circumstances, but it can also stem from hope, a desire to create something better." His words resonated deeply within her, jabbing at the doubts she had almost resolved. The thought of fear driving action unleashed a torrent of memories from her nursing days, the moments that had kept her up at night, pushing her beyond the expected into the realm of essential change. Those experiences lingered, shaping her increasingly restless spirit. "How do you convert that fear or hope into tangible action?" she pressed, her curiosity mingling with the urgency of her mission. Through each question, she was peeling back layers not only from Ted, but from herself. It felt like shining a light into the depths of her own motivations and exposing what had been hidden for far too long. "By understanding your own story," he replied, his eyes locking onto hers. His confidence in his answer was palpable, pushing her to reflect on her own narrative and its weight. Ted continued, "When you understand why you are afraid or hopeful, you can channel that into action that matters." Thoughts raced in her mind, Her frustration with her dormant abilities, the conflicts she had had with herself, the nurturing tendencies constricting her growth. She could feel the pieces aligning, the potential energy pulsating within her begging to be released. "I've always been a caretaker," she admitted, her voice softening, almost exposing a vulnerability she rarely allowed others to see. "But where does that leave me? I want to empower others." "That's a start," Ted encouraged, his tone respectful yet firm. "Empowering others requires you to step out of that role, to voice your own fears and stories." The sincerity of his perspective ignited something within her. As she considered the potential of stepping out, she envisioned her role shifting from caretaker to leader, a guide alongside those seeking their own truths. But the prospect of that transformation felt daunting. What if they still saw her as merely a nurse, a helper, rather than a champion of change? Steeling herself, she resolved to explore this idea further. What if I could share a part of my story that isn't tied just to nursing? Something raw, my struggles, my self-doubt. What if exposing my flaws could inspire action? "The bravest thing you can do is to be real," Ted replied, a soft smile breaking the intensity of their conversation. "Embrace your multifaceted identity. That's what will resonate with others." Her mind began to whirl with possibilities. What if she curated a sharing session, an opportunity for her and others to unearth vulnerabilities? It was bold. It was frightening. But wasn't that the essence of transformation? As she immersed herself in the idea, envisioning a space where honesty flourished, other possibilities danced on the horizon. How might Josh respond to not just a performance, but a collective sharing of dreams and vulnerabilities? Could that be a catalyst not only for him, but for others? Yet another layer of uncertainty loomed. The practicalities of her plans knocked at the back of her mind. How would she facilitate such a gathering? Did she have the resourcefulness to arrange it without falling into the trap of overextending herself? Feeling the edges of hesitation creeping back, she took a deep breath. Sarah realized she needed to commit to action even if the plan felt flimsy. "I can do this," she whispered under her breath, her determination solidifying with each passing moment. "I will do this." As they parted ways shortly after, she felt empowered but heavy with the responsibility that lay ahead. The next steps would demand more of her than she had anticipated, requiring her to engage not only with others, but also within herself. It was time to challenge her deeply ingrained identity as the caretaker, and she could feel the churning of something significant on the cusp of her transformation. But concern niggled at her thoughts. What if it wasn't well received? The vulnerability she planned to expose could provoke more doubt. As she stepped outside, a chilly wind brushed against her skin, invigorating yet unsettling. Igniting change had its risks, and the fear of becoming vulnerable loomed as large as the possibilities for growth. With every wave of uncertainty, she felt the urge to push forward deepen. It was a choice, to remain cautious along the edges or to jump headfirst into the unknown. A choice that would ultimately decide the direction of her journey, one that could redefine not only herself, but impact the lives she coveted to touch. What awaited her could either reinforce her resolve or shatter her intentions completely. Unbeknownst to Sarah, the paths diverging ahead held the thrill of potential yet loaded with pressure. She could feel the stakes drastically rising. She took a deep breath, looking toward the horizon, ready to embrace the chaos of what lay ahead. The time had come to face her own narrative, both the comfort and discomfort embedded within. Would she emerge ready to take on the challenge? Would her story become a source of inspiration or vulnerability for failure? The next morning, Sarah woke with her resolve tested by an amalgam of determination and trepidation. The hour was early, the world still wrapped in the muted colors of dawn. Yet within her, a storm brewed, amplifying the gravity of her burgeoning plans. As she prepared for the day, the weight of the upcoming gathering felt heavy yet electric, a blend of hope and fear that was almost intoxicating. She couldn't help but question whether she was truly ready to expose her vulnerabilities to those she wished to empower. Her inner dialogue danced between enthusiasm and apprehension as she moved through her morning routine. The mere act of brewing coffee felt pivotal, like each drip echoed her doubts. What if sharing her story backfired? What if instead of rallying others to embrace their weaknesses, she simply became a caricature of her fears? She steadied herself, forcing the negative thoughts to the background. It was essential, she reminded herself, to shift from a mindset of care to one of leadership. Still, at the core of her uncertainty lay a profound realization, one that Ted had inadvertently unlocked. Sarah had clung to the role of caregiver with a fierce loyalty. It was a comforting identity, one that required little risk. Yet now, she stood on the brink of transforming that identity entirely. She envisioned the boundaries of her evolution. They loomed in her mind like jagged cliffs over a restless sea. By the time she sped through morning traffic, anticipation began to ripple through her veins. She could hear Ted's voice echoing in her head, urging her to embrace her multifaceted identity. This wasn't just a moment of vulnerability. It was a catalyst for authentic connectivity, an opportunity to bridge the gap between her past and the leader she aspired to be. As she reached her office, Sarah's gaze fell upon her colleagues, immersed in their daily routines. She felt the magnetic pull to retreat into her role of caretaker, to slip back into the soothing realm of bandaging wounds, managing overworked schedules, and alleviating stress. Yet every fiber of her being screamed for something more. Was this what she had once desired? An escape from the turmoil of leadership? If she wholeheartedly embraced the opportunity to lead, what fragments of her would emerge? Over lunch, she made her decision. Seated with her usual group, their banter flew by, but her mind was elsewhere. She would initiate a conversation. Something simple, an invitation to share. As she mentally drafted her words, fear fluttered in the pit of her stomach. A faint whisper warned her. What if they deflected? What if they laughed? Her pulse quickened, and she inhaled deeply, steadying herself as she raised her voice. "Hey everyone, I'd like to try something different," she began, her heart pounding beneath her sternum. "I think it could be helpful to share our experiences, our struggles." A silence fell across the table, the weight of her proposition hanging limply like a fragile balloon caught in the wind. She prepared for their responses, anxious laughter, dismissive gestures. Yet to her surprise, there was a flicker of interest in Josh's eyes. He didn't smirk or brush her off. Instead, he leaned in, curiosity dancing on his face. "I like that idea," he said slowly. "It's rare we talk about the real stuff here, isn't it?" Sarah's heartbeat steadied, amplifying the thrill of this unexpected engagement. Hope kindled anew within her. Perhaps this was the opening she needed, the gateway to actual transformation. But as optimism surged, her thoughts inevitably swung back to her fears. What if the path forward involved confrontations she wasn't prepared for? "If you're willing, I'd love to share my own challenges," she said cautiously. The words tumbled out. "Then, maybe we can all open up?" The others nodded, but there was an unspoken, unintentional consequence looming overhead. With every invitation she extended to others, her own vulnerabilities, as raw as they were, came flushing back, enticing her to retreat. As they agreed to further discuss that potential idea over an informal gathering, Sarah realized the price of her transformation. Every step forward demanded the courage to face their judgment. The ideal of empowerment previously felt expansive, now felt dangerously close, much like a dance on a precipice. The confrontation with self, the unmasking of her hidden insecurities, loomed ahead, tantalizing yet terrifying. Would the courage she displayed inspire others to meet her vulnerability with open arms? And then a chilling thought settled in. What if, in her pursuit of connection, she inadvertently exposed deeper fissures in her own narrative more than she ever anticipated? Each decision chiseled away at her identity, provoking thoughts that danced both ways: the nurturing caretaker she had been, and the leader she wished to ascend into. As the day drew to an end, she felt the familiar evening chill creep back into her bones, mingling with trepidation. The gathering she envisioned was both an opportunity and a minefield. She could feel the weight of possibility press down on her shoulders, demanding she tread carefully. The challenge was more profound than she had prepared for, much more than mere planning. It was about forging connections and confronting the lies she had whispered to herself over the years. In the hushed quiet of her office, Sarah paused. Tomorrow would be a test of her convictions, a showdown between courageous leadership and the deep-seated fears of vulnerability. What awaited her on this path of uncharted leadership could shape the contours of her identity forever. Would her leap unveil a transformation worth sharing, or would the weight of inadequacy force her to retract into the shadows once more? As dawn broke the next day, Sarah sat on her porch, wrapped in a cozy blanket. The sun spilled golden light across her neighborhood, illuminating familiar faces engaged in their daily routines. This morning, however, her thoughts raced beyond the usual rhythm. Today was the day she would host the gathering. Today, she would take a leap of faith into her own vulnerability and leadership. As she prepared, her mind fluctuated between excitement and doubt. The notion of sharing her struggles, her journey from caregiver to community advocate, felt daunting. She could visualize the room filled with neighbors, their faces reflecting a mix of anticipation and curiosity. Did she really have the strength to expose her fears? Anxiety pulsed within her, but the desire for transformation flared brighter. The gathering unfolded in a flurry of activity. She set out snacks, creating a welcoming atmosphere. As the doorbell rang, each guest who entered became a thread weaving into the larger tapestry of their community, a community ready to build connection through shared experiences. Glimmers of courage began to illuminate her path. When the last guests arrived, Sarah stood at the center of the room, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Taking a deep breath, she introduced herself and the purpose of the evening. "We're not just talking about how to help Emily," she began, her voice steadying. "We're connecting as individuals, sharing our stories, because through connection, we can foster real change." The nervous energy transformed into engagement as she invited others to open up. She began by sharing her own challenges, the feeling of isolation after Emily's diagnosis, the struggle between professional pride and the need for community. With each word, the tension in the room began to ease, replaced by empathy and understanding. One by one, neighbors shared their own stories, their fears, hopes, and the paths they had walked. Josh, her musician friend, opened up about the fears that halted his performances. Mrs. Henderson, with warmth in her voice, spoke of loneliness after losing her husband. The room resonated with authenticity, each story echoing Sarah's realization. Vulnerability invited strength. In that moment, she understood that her fears no longer defined her. They were part of a collective struggle that united them all. Laughter mingled with tears as they spoke, building a foundation of trust that felt refreshing and liberating. She saw Ted in the corner, nodding slowly, the skepticism replaced by intrigue and perhaps acceptance. As the evening wore on, Sarah felt opulence and purpose swell within her. Instead of yielding to discomfort, she embraced the transformative power of vulnerability. That introspective shift, a deep reckoning with self, became the catalyst for others to express their own ambitions and dreams. Following a discussion on supporting one another, an idea sparked within the group. They decided to hold regular gatherings, a space dedicated to sharing stories and collaboratively discovering ways to support each other. The simple act of forging connections ignited a broader movement toward reinvestment in their relationships, thus transforming what had once felt superficial into something profoundly meaningful. As the gathering came to a close, Sarah felt the weight lift from her shoulders. They had achieved something remarkable, not just raised awareness for Emily's needs, but had become a solid community. It was a tangible victory, and it rejuvenated her spirit. Amidst the smiles and heartfelt goodbyes, a warmth settled in her chest, a sense of genuine fulfillment that she had not anticipated. She recognized that this adventure was more than about securing a wheelchair. It was about listening, empowering others, and embracing one's story as a vehicle for deeper connection and understanding. As the door closed behind her last guest, a quiet reflection washed over her. Standing alone in her vibrant home, filled with remnants of shared laughter, she realized this gathering embodied a significant transformation, a step from the safety of caregiving into the empowering role of leadership. The journey might lead to more uncertainties, but she had proven to herself that stepping into vulnerability catalyzed authentic growth. Today was the day she learned not only about community, but about herself too. She had achieved a transformation worthy of celebration, setting out to redefine her identity on her own terms. Immersing herself in purpose, she now felt ready to embrace whatever awaited next with renewed confidence. This was merely the beginning of something that transcended her initial expectations. This is the moment you need to act. Subscribe immediately to our channel and don't miss any exclusive emotional stories that could inspire your own transformation. Leave a like now to strengthen this community and help us reach even more people. Share your reactions and theories about today's conclusion, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring journey. Your support matters. Let's continue to uplift and empower one another together.